Honorable colleagues, at our last sitting, we invited the Secretary to the government, DG, NCNC, and the Minister of Health for some clarifications and to get an update on what's going on particularly in Kano, particularly because there was a serious breakout there and everybody seems to be guessing as to what's going on.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of funds, the chairman of the committee has made mention of infrastructural donations, finances, plus including grains and food items that were given. He was specific when it comes to the rice, how many number of trucks they gave out. This is the good opportunity, Mr. Speaker, for Nigerians who elected parliament in the wisdom of our constitution to know in specific terms, just to open that account number, how much was donated into that account, and mention it to the parliament should have been the easiest thing the chairman of this committee would have done. So, Mr. Speaker, just like he was specific in the number of trucks of rice given to Nigerians, the parliament want him to be specific in the amount of money contributed by Nigerians and non-Nigerians. We want to know so that Nigeria will hold government accountable and responsible for those donations made in the interests of this country.
One of the compartments is the one of the COVID group. That's the central bank, the banks, and the Dangote conglomerate. They have pledged certain amounts of money and certain specific interventions in infrastructure. None of that amount of money would come into the account of the PTF or of government. They've opened their account in the Central Bank of Nigeria where all those deposits would go into as per the pledges that have come from different organizations. And they have a design program with which we interface together to agree so that we do not have duplication of the same infrastructure or the same intervention in specific areas. So that's one of the interventions. The second intervention is the one by the NMPC and the oil and gas partners. That too is situated within the same regime with the COVID intervention. None of the monies that are raised by that group will come into the coffers of the government. They are specifically designed for interventions in different areas of infrastructure, building of units, provision of ventilators, and consumables. That too, we have asked them to meet with our people to harmonize so that at the end of the day, we can proudly say from the different interventions, that is what we've been able to achieve. The third one is the United Nations Basket Fund, where you have the WHO, where you have the European Union, and every multilateral and bilateral donations that will come in. That goes into that fund. That is not managed by the government or the PTF, it is managed by the United Nations family through their basket fund. Through that, they have looked at the picture of what are the requirements in Nigeria in conjunction with the PTF and have agreed about certain areas of intervention. So those three, we cannot account for it. The one that we can account for if the need arises, because the letter I received was subject specific, dealing with Kano and what we have been able to do nationwide. The Accountant General of the Federation opened 5 accounts in different commercial banks, where all donors, apart from these 3 groups that I've mentioned, who desires to make any donation, will pay into those accounts. Whatever is paid into those accounts on a daily basis, it is mopped into the PTF account that is domiciled with the central bank. If I knew that was required, I would have asked the Accountant General, how much have you realized? Because I don't have access, neither does the PTF have access to that account. It's an account that is under the control of the federal government of Nigeria, and whatever contributions come from different individuals. Some people are paying 10,000, 1,000, 3,000 into those accounts. They are mopped up and moved into an account dedicated in the central bank. At any appropriate moment, we can make that available, but that will require an inquiry from the Accountant General. How much have gone into the account? How much have you earned? And how much have moved into that account? So that is the answer. That ties to a question by an honorable member as to, I was specific with the other items, but I was not specific with the amount. I think that explains the reason why I cannot be specific with any amount, because none of the accounts is under my direct control or that of the PTF. They are controlled from different segments of our community. The MOU, sir. The MOU has been signed with the medical doctors, with the pharmacists, with the other frontline health workers, and it is of immediate application. But that would have to go through some processes, and I know that that has even been discussed with the Minister of Finance and Budget and National Planning. That is as it relates to the federal civil servants. We have cascaded that to the states for their adaptation from state to state. Some states will vary it on the high side. Some might say that, look, considering the situation in which we are now, with meager resources coming as a result of the downturn in our earnings through the crude oil sales, we can't afford this. They will negotiate with their people and come to an agreement. What we've been able to do through our partnership with the insurance industry is that of their own volition, they've been able to give a cover to 5,000 health workers segmented into different categories, covering, as a matter of fact, they paid about 11 of insurance companies paid a premium of over 100 million for that particular package to come on board. And that's quite commendable. We can see how Nigerians from different facets of life are making every available effort to ensure that we provide for our people. I will jump the other questions because they are technical in nature. I will leave the experts to answer, but there's a particular question here that spoke about specific amount, then the one that spoke about what are we doing. We've mentioned everything that we are doing from an honorable member, and there was no question, no reference to the place of prayer. I believe in prayers, and I know Nigerians have been praying. Probably that explains why we've not had an escalation and a deterioration at the magnitude that is facing most nations. Realizing that if you compare the fact that no country was prepared for COVID-19, and up to this moment, no country is adequately ready to deal with the issues of COVID-19. We take a step every day at a time and judge the impact of those steps. Even major economies have been crumbled to their knees as a result of the devastating effect of COVID-19. So I believe that the place of prayer is significant. And I mentioned that in paragraph 7, item 6 of my remarks this morning, when I said we were consulting with traditional rulers and religious leaders. If you watch the NTA, there's a program that is being sponsored, the Abrahamic Mission, that talks a lot about COVID-19, about the place of prayers in the two major faiths in this country. And I believe that in your individual closet, in your prayer altars back at home, and even during this very holy month of Ramadan, people are praying to God for His mercy, for His grace, to sustain and protect the people of this country and the world over. So I acknowledge the place of prayer, and I believe that prayer has successfully helped Nigeria to be where we are now. Given the dimensions and given the projections and the modeling, we ought to have crumbled by now. But I can assure you that the place of prayer has played an active role, an active part in sustaining us as a people and as a country. There was this question about the palliatives being shared. Because the Honorable Minister for Humanitarian Affairs is not here, I will take that question. And it's skewed against the Southeast and the South. I don't think it is skewed. The palliatives, the first that went out, was specifically for the 3 areas where the federal government had introduced a lockdown. And with 13 other states that were considered frontline states because of the nature of the conflict in those states, particularly in the northeastern part of the country that we have a lot of refugees. Those were the ones that benefited from the 70,000 tons of grains released from the strategic grain reserve. And what are the things that are in the strategic grain reserve? Is sorghum, maize, millet, and gari. A lot of the constituencies in Nigeria do not eat those things as stable food. So those were part of the considerations for even the sharing. But the rice that was received through the customs seizures were distributed across the nation in equal number, except for the 3 states that the federal government had put the lockdown. So I believe in this particular battle, it is the collective resolve and the will of our people that will see us through. And I will not preside over any committee that will skew any distribution or any allocation against any part of Nigeria. Nigeria is our constituency, and we will make sure that everybody satisfactorily receives whatever is deserving of in this particular attempt to create some measure of comfort or succor to our people. That is not enough. I have been in discussions with the co-COVID group. They intend to engage, and we have asked them, irrespective of political party, deal with the subnational governments in the various constituencies. That way, we will be equitable in the distribution and equitable in also dealing with our people. This is not a time for any political distribution. And they have agreed with that, and they are working on theirs. Others, well-spirited people, have also been contributing. Churches have contributed, most Islamic societies have contributed to the community. This is the time that we should truly be our brothers' keepers and be good neighbors in this dispensation. The other question has to deal with measures that are being taken with regards to the economy. The PTF has not direct bearing on the activities of the economy at this time. But Mr. President, in his wisdom, has set up 2 committees, 3, as a matter of fact. The first one is the committee headed, the Economic Committee on the COVID-19, headed by the Honorable Minister for Finance, Budget, and National Plan. That committee is to look at the impact of COVID on the economy as of now, and to bring out policies and measures that will address the adverse effect. Because I have said it often and often times, that COVID-19 has not only come to attack our health, but it's also destroying our wealth. We have to acknowledge that. So this committee's responsibility is to look at how we can fare in spite of this tremendous attack that has come on our wealth and our health. And the second committee is the Economic Sustainability Committee. That is to look at our economy post-COVID-19. What measures do we have to put in place? What are the things we need to do to stimulate the economy? The first committee has looked at how to stimulate the economy. And I think it is through that process that the central bank has come up with a lot of measures. The first one is the 100 billion, which is designed to equip our health sector, the hospitals and the pharmaceutical companies, so that they are assisted to begin to revive their manufacturing capacity, and the hospitals to expand and provide facilities. Because like I said, COVID-19 has exposed the inadequacies of our infrastructure. We must do something to address that. And there's another 50 billion to deal with small business enterprises like hotels, restaurants, and the rest of it that have greatly been impacted as a result of the closure. You know, if you go around the city of Abuja, virtually all the hotels are closed down. They don't have clientele. You go to restaurants are shut up. There's basically a lot of adverse effect on those form of businesses. So I believe that in the central bank packages and the stimulus that the Economic Sustainability and the Economic Committee on COVID-19 are putting in place, we will be able to in place a lot of measures and strategies. I will only advise our people to look up on the website of the central bank. You will see the guidelines of how to access these funds through your various different banks. And I believe that working together we will be able to pull through. The other issue is how will PTF ensure social distancing and the use of masks? Truly, we've gotten to the level or to the stage of personal responsibility. This is where we have gotten to now. We must take personal responsibility for our safety, for our lives, and those of our loved ones. This is not the time to expect government or the National Assembly to take responsibilities for us. At an individual level, this is the time that we must honor. What happens subsequently will be dependent on what we do as a people and as a nation. The issue of social distancing doesn't have to be imposed by police. There are other countries disciplined enough. Taiwan didn't lock down for even one day. But gradually, they flattened the curve because of social distancing and the wearing of masks and staying at home when it is not needful for you to step out of the house. Because this is a virus that is only transmitted when you have contact with people. As long as that is reduced tremendously, a tremendous percentage of infection is reduced. Added with these other items of personal hygiene and also keeping social distance and wearing of masks. And I believe that we have come to a place where going forward as a people and as a nation, the ways of the past must be left in the past. We must deliberately, as a result of personal choices, make that going forward, our cultural affinities, our ways of doing things have been disrupted, and they have been disrupted for good. We will never return to those days again. I'm very passionate about this because I know that that is the only way we can survive as a country, when we take personal responsibility. So the government agencies and the security agencies will do their best in enforcing social distancing by being persuasive. How many people can you take into jail? Our jail houses are already filled up. How many people can you punish? There must be a lot of persuasion in this matter. And it befalls on us, all Nigerians, leaders in different forms and in different levels, to apply the processes of persuading our people. Yesterday was the first day. You saw the crowd that came out. Did everybody have to come out, even with the limitations of people who are supposed to report in the places of work? People thought it is just another liberty awarded. So I believe, Your Excellency, Mr. Speaker, and honorable members of the House, we have a collective responsibility to ensure that we persuade our people to abide by these rules, which are not punitive in nature, but they are meant to protect us as a people. And I believe, with your resolve and with your encouragement and support, we'll be able to get through with this. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I will cede the floor to other technical experts to answer the technical questions. Thank you, sir.
Your Excellencies, many of the questions, as we know, are overlapping, but I will, in answering some of them, I believe that others will find their own answers in there. First of all, the response of the government. Immediately the virus infection broke out in China, we had a response strategy, and that strategy was based on the fact that we believed the entry of this virus into this country would be by air. And we started immediately scaling up testing at our airports. We are among the first in the world to start this testing, rigorous testing. We developed questionnaires, and I believe many honorable members here who travel around that period will have found that even in London and Paris, they were not doing any questioning, they were not doing any testing. But here in Nigeria, we're doing testing, we're checking your temperature, we're checking your travel history, and watching very closely, listening to what was happening in all parts of the world. In fact, Nigeria was commended by the World Health Organization and later on by the Secretary General of the UN for being very proactive in preventing this disease. There was in fact a case of one Nigerian during that period who came in from Wuhan, because we were in touch with our embassy all the time on a very regular basis, at the embassy in China, and we got information that this gentleman had come in and somehow or the other slipped through the control mechanism and was inside Lagos. We sent a message to the Lagos team and they tracked him down in his house, put him under observation. Luckily, he was negative. That would have been our first case. But the first case was to come in again. He had no symptoms at the time, and by the time he entered Nigeria, 2 days later, he had been identified, also thanks to a very efficient doctor who saw him. And then the contact tracing of 179 people were done. The one who was positive, they were put immediately into isolation and treated. So the mechanism started very early, and we did well, and because of that, our cases never really rose very high like in other countries. But then, of course, the appearance of many, many travelers and many people overwhelmed the mechanisms we have, and it was no longer possible to control, to do all the contact tracing that followed. Now, to specifically to the questions, are the testing centers in Kano enough? For now, 3 of them, yes. The testing capacity is probably less than 50%, but as the need arises, it will increase. It will increase everywhere else in the world, in Nigeria, because we are getting access to more testing kits and also access to more testing machines. The use of artemeter, yes, we are participating in clinical trials, and these trials involve pharmaceuticals. We have in Lagos, in Abuja, we are using things which the World Health Organization set up, a system called Solidarity, to study the efficacy of certain drugs in treating COVID-19. And among those, hydroxychloroquine and the azithromycin, which were said to have been successful in some countries, although we didn't see the impact. And the chloroquine, I'm sure artemether will be among. Is there a vaccine among them? No. We are not doing vaccine tests. We are not, enrolled in any vaccine trial because the processes have not yet been developed enough for them to be safe enough. Once they're developed well enough, we may consider taking part. Now, as for those who are getting medical attention,
Chairman Finance,
the purpose,
Chairman Finance, please disband that your caucus. Chairman Youth.
The purpose of isolation. There are 3 categories of people who get infected with COVID-19. There are those who are completely asymptomatic. They have those symptoms, they feel very well, they don't believe that they are sick. There are others who have moderate symptoms and they will require treatment. And there are those who have critical symptoms, and some of these ones will require ventilators. They are less than 5%. But the majority of them will have those symptoms, particularly the younger ones. The older ones and those who have other diseases, maybe hypertension, diabetes, kidney disease, and so on, those ones who probably don't have enough capacity to build antibodies, they will fall sick. Those are the ones who will require very sophisticated treatment. Luckily for us, we have not had that many yet. We have only a handful. We have only had to use only a handful of ventilators, and that has not been our challenge here. But those who are without symptoms, they are capable of transmitting this disease, and they are particularly a high-risk case because they might be sitting with those who are vulnerable. And those who are vulnerable will now get it from them while they remain healthy or relatively healthy. The vulnerable will stand the risk of losing their lives. So the strategy is to keep everybody who is positive in isolation until they test negative. Once they test negative, they leave. Now, during that period, because they have those symptoms, they may not be given anything at all. They may not be given any medicine. They may be given only vitamins.
Chairman Youth.
They may be getting.
Please take your seat.
They may be getting only vitamins and supportive treatment. So some of them feel that they are wasting their time in there. They are not getting any treatment. In reality, the healing from COVID-19 comes from your body building antibodies to tackle the virus. If you build antibodies very highly, you tackle it more easily. Those who don't build very well will have a serious problem with it. That is why among the fatalities, rarely you see any person under the age of 20. Most of them are above 30, and the highest percentage are those who are 50 and above, particularly those who have illnesses like cancer, HIV, anything that prevents their body from being smart enough to build the antibodies to tackle the virus. Research, yes, we are participating in, other research we are participating in is in using convalescent serum. Because the theory is that if somebody has suffered from coronavirus disease and recovered, will his serum contain the antibodies that can be used to treat somebody who can't be treated otherwise? We are participating, we are trying to do that one in Lagos. We are waiting for results from the Herbal Commissioner of Health in Lagos is luckily an infectious disease specialist. And here in Abuja, we're also looking at participating in using convalescent serum. Many countries are trying to do the same thing. So the other question is regards to Kano, whether these deaths were due to COVID-19. That is the subject of a very sad and serious distortion of news. The person who's heading the federal team in there did not ever say that the people who died from coronavirus disease. In fact, that very morning when the news broke out, we had just spoken, and he told me they're carrying out investigation along 3 streams. And we discussed the streams of investigation being conducted by Kano State and supported by pathologists from the Federal Ministry Health System. So that test is still going on. There are no results. But in giving an interview, the reporter totally distorted the statement that he made. And since then, that statement, the report has been withdrawn, and they have apologized to him. So there was never a case of him saying that 80% of people died from that or any other disease at all. Now, steps that are being taken to improve the outcome in view of the changing of the lockdown and relaxing. The handling of coronavirus, of COVID infection, is the subject of the Ministry of Health, but also a subject of the communities. Because the influence of the community leaders is extremely strong in persuading people to cooperate. We are talking now about social distancing, physical distancing. This is something that I believe community leaders, religious leaders, and traditional leaders will handle. Because if we believe that if we are able to talk to the leaders, political leaders here, they can help us drive that. The success of this next phase we are going into now depends on the success of these social non-pharmaceutical measures. If they succeed, we shall be happy. There are some people who have raised apprehension and said, some countries relaxed their lockdown and then their figures spiked. Well, at the moment, our figures are actually still rising. So if they still rise a little during this period, it's not necessarily due to having relaxed the figures. But if we are able to keep all these social measures which have been added, for example, compulsory wearing of a mask, social distancing, limiting the number of people who can enter a market, limiting the number of people who are at a gathering, hand washing, and so on, several measures that have been introduced, if we are able to put them into practice, we shall not see a spike due to having relaxed the lockdown. And the lockdown itself that has been relaxed wisely because farmers must go and plant. Goods and farm products must be able to reach destination. People can rebuild their businesses and rebuild their livelihood. The lockdown has led to the collapse of many, many livelihoods and small businesses. So it opens the window for people to rebuild their lives. At the same time, if we actually strengthen and reinforce the social measures, we shall not suffer any consequences. So it's a very narrow path, but the wisest path that has been taken by His Excellency the President to win on both sides. And we are praying that and hoping that honorable members here will support those initiatives. Now, the local treatment and testing capabilities, yes, they are being expanded. We are increasing the number of sample collection centers. You don't necessarily have to put a testing machine everywhere because you need to train the workers, and also the capacity that we have now is not being fully utilized. So if you have a machine that can do 1,000 tests a day and is being used maybe to do 300, there's 700 spaces remaining. So the best you can do is collect samples and have an efficient method of bringing them to a testing center. This is what they do in many countries. Many countries are doing it like that. With regard to the gene expert machine, yes, we have this access to funds from the Global Fund, which we applied for them to allow us to repurpose some of the funds in there to be able to take care of our needs there. And part of what we requested was for them to allow us to use cartridges that are used for gene expert machines. So our order now, which will come within a few weeks, is for 107,000 cartridges for gene expert machines, and also 26 biosafety level 2 cabinets that go along with using the cartridges on the gene expert machines. So we are hoping that within a couple of weeks, this will be taken care of. We have placed the order, we are on the queue. Because of global demand, everybody who orders, you are on the queue before you get your own supply. So we shall have the privilege of getting gene expert machines, and possibly one for every, at least one for every state of the Federation, and probably even more for large states with such a distance that logistics is difficult. Now, local production of PPE, yes, we have been talking with the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment. We've had a meeting with them, and we have also spoken with Manufacturers Association. There are many initiatives to produce masks and also the protective gowns. We have met even with some government companies who have told us that they are able to do that, so we are going to place order and rely on ourselves. That's what most countries are doing. There's a global shortage of masks, global shortage of gowns. The latest country to complain of shortage now was the UK and also Russia. So we are in a global competitive environment to get things that we like to use to protect our healthcare workers, but at the same time using the opportunity to develop local production capabilities. And we hope that that will help us to relieve the pressure on any shortages, although we don't have real shortages at the moment because we have been insisting on a good stockpile of what we need to have in the country. The perception of coronavirus as a big man's disease, that was the beginning, yes, because we all knew that it was imported. You had to have gone abroad and come back with an infection like that. So a lot of people believe that it was only the concern of big men. So at that time, what you do is get the infected person, trace his contacts, and then you can arrest the disease at that time. But by the time it filters down to the grassroots, it's no more just a big man's disease. It's everybody's disease. That's why we call it the community transmission phase, because now the people who have it are people who don't even know the way to the airport. They have no passport, and you cannot tell how they got this infection. So this phase requires a completely different process, a completely different strategy. So the Ministry of Health is working on a action plan, a community response action plan, which will be out by next week. And we also set up a committee of expert advisors headed by Professor Tomori, who will be helping us, very well-known virologists, to set up the strategy for this phase now that the entire country is going to be involved with it. So the isolation centers, they are being managed by doctors and nurses, and for those who are very well, really, the only thing you need to do is to entertain them. So entertain themselves. Some are dancing, and we also have mental health experts who talk with them, because the boredom there can be very, very difficult for some. Nevertheless, there are people who also run away, and some who don't even report at all. So we are very concerned about that, and I would like to use this opportunity to let the members of the House know that they should help us to get everybody under control, because any person who is not accounted for might be, so we are trying to trace the contacts. Now, the use of local herbs, every person who comes to say they have local herbs, we refer straight away to our Nigerian Institute for Pharmaceutical Research and Development to go and show them, analyze it, see whether it works, if it works, so that we can make the best use of what we have. We are not dismissing anything. We are not throwing away any idea that comes. As for the National Orientation Agency, yes, we work very well with the Honorable Minister of Information and all the agency under him. He has been to our office so many times. He has supported us with trying to get access to radio, to get access to TV, so that we can push the information. Because if the population is not well informed, they are not going along with us, the story will be extremely difficult. So, the face masks, yes, we have also pleaded that donors and philanthropists should make masks available. Masks will be the easiest and cheapest way, but it's not a replacement for community, for distancing, for social distancing. But we know that in very highly densely populated cities, like places in Lagos or Kano, where it's difficult asking people not to isolate. So they are packed together already. So the next easiest thing you can do is give them all masks, so that they know that they wear the mask and they wash it every evening and put on the mask. So that it's not the full answer, but at least it's better than nothing. And also when they leave their homes, they wear this mask and make sure that they wash it every day and don't use it without improving the hygiene that goes along with it. So I've already mentioned what we have done since the days of China. And the manpower, well, manpower development is according to need. The NCDC will speak to that. But we have also been doing deployment of manpower as the need arises. Our number one virus research center and hospital in this country is in Irua. That's where we have the team who went to Liberia and Sierra Leone to go and help them with Ebola. That's a major center for Lassa fever, and all these are virus diseases. And this is also a virus disease. So we have been bringing those people here to come and help us set up here in Abuja. We have also sent them to Kano now to go and help. There are about probably up to 8 of them in Kano as I speak now, helping them go through the protocol, because we have some issues there of people getting infected. But these people are experts in knowing how to ward against all these infections, and they are going to help to set up the processes in there. The SGF has spoken about the health insurance, the shortages of equipment we have spoken about. Now, the situation in other states, what we are doing is that in anticipation of problems in other states, particularly in the north, where we are already seeing galloping figures, we have set up a mechanism to ask those states to bring doctors and nurses in various areas to come to Kano and receive training, because the team that we have sent in there is doing a lot of training capacity, so that one day you hand over everything back to Kano. Kano was caught off guard with all of this. But to bring people from other states, even before they have any high numbers, so that they already have a manpower to start with. So they go back to their areas. They already have doctors and nurses who have been trained in infection prevention and control. They have been trained in protocols of hygiene and how to prevent infection, until you are ready to really set them up, even if they don't have any cases yet, to be pre-trained. So that's the strategy we are using to make sure that we address other states in the north, particularly, also some of them in the south too. The question of restricting travel, that is a very critical part, because even in Kano right now, 95% of all the cases are in the municipal local government areas, about 7 or 8 municipal local government areas. If there is a way for us to be able to cordon these local governments, discourage them from traveling by giving them the things they need, then the risk of carrying this infection to other local governments is reduced. And the majority of cases that have popped up in other states in the north were due to people who travel from Kano, and they already carried this virus and they didn't know. So if we are able to restrict this travel, even though it is within the state, it will help us a lot. We have also followed the President's advisory that interstate travel should stop for the time being, except for essential goods and essential movement, so that people are not carrying this virus from one place to the other. So there's a possibility to restrict the transmission of the virus from one local government to the other if the state government and the local government cooperate to limit movements within local governments, except for very essential movements. That will help a lot. Now, the ventilators, yes, we have a lot of ventilators. We have received them from donors from outside, from the United Nations group and so on. So we have also looked at all the ventilators we have. But the ventilator is like a car. You have to learn how to use it. And there are not many people who know how to use it. So we have also embarked on a special crash treatment protocol to train those who know how to use it. That Society of Anesthetists, I've been in conversation with them to do crash courses in Lagos, so that we train people from various states who do not have specialists in intensive care medicine. This is already intensive care and critical care medicine, to make sure that they get the knowledge and the skills. That situation is going on very well. And then finally is the case of the incident in Kano, not only in Kano, but in other areas where private and public practitioners are turning away patients because they are afraid. It has happened in Kano, unfortunately, in other areas too, that patients who appear at the hospital are not treated because they are worried, and then you are getting this situation where people are losing their lives due to other things that are not even COVID related. So that is not a good situation. That is one of the reasons why the primary health care sent somebody in to go and remobilize and retrain and inform people in Kano. And the ministry also sent a family health expert to talk and reorientate all the hospitals, both private and public, about the value of keeping family medicine going, immunization, antenatal clinic, and care for diabetics, blood hypertensives. All these ones will go on, and particularly also malaria, because if you don't attend to all of these, they can take more life than COVID. So we are emphasizing that service, delivery of routine service must continue and must not be something that is ignored because of fear or of COVID or focus on COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I believe one second, perhaps I didn't hear you. There was a question on local cure, possibly for the pandemic, if you're doing anything about it, and it was reiterated by Honorable Ben Kalu as well. Local cure for the pandemic. Is there anything? I know the PTF chairman addressed it, but what exactly is being done?
Local cure will depend on, will address two issues. Number one is something that actually destroys the virus, or something that reduces the symptoms, because the symptoms are cough, fever particularly, and sore throat. So you can give medication that reduces those symptoms, but it's not cured, in that the virus is still active. So, but it relieves for the time being. At the end of the day, it is the person's body that must build the antibodies to neutralize the virus. And giving a normal healthy person, mostly young people, they will do that in a short time and be able to neutralize the virus. But the capacity to build antibodies is exactly the problem. Some say they are giving immune boosting medication. Well, whether it is proven or not, so far it doesn't do any harm. We do not discourage anybody from trying it. So those who give immune boosting, yes. Now, to actually cure the virus, it was thought at one time that, to actually destroy the virus, it was thought that chloroquine would do it. But the tests are still going on whether that is true or not. Countries where they tried to use chloroquine didn't really show any dramatic reduction in their cases, or hydroxychloroquine or other. But again, that is not, the jury is still out on that. The other new trial is an antiretroviral drug, which I think the United States just wanted to start using. But we have been using that. We have tried that in Lagos too. So we are trying the antiretroviral drugs to see what effect it has. But as far as local content, local drugs are concerned, we have to test and test the toxicity. Does it have side effects? Does it have undesired effects? Can it do the work, or at least will it not harm the person? Because some medicine can do harm rather than good. So for that now we need to have trials done. Luckily we have a research center, the Nigeria Institute for Pharmaceutical Research. They are very good. They have a lot of professors in there who can look at these things and tell us whether they work or not. So all local cure, herbal cures, will be referred there for evaluation and for the efficacy and for the toxicity to make sure that anybody who uses Locacure is safe, and also that it works. Even if it works psychologically, it's also fine, but so far it doesn't do any harm. That is the content, local content so far.
Regarding the question to open up maybe gradually the civil aviation activity within the country, Mr. Speaker, you will agree with me that aviation is the most hit. Unfortunately, right after when we have gotten the industry to become the fastest growing sector in the country. At the time that we started implementing the roadmap approved by His Excellency Mr. President, the sector was nowhere near many sectors in this country. Then suddenly, at the close of 2018, Q4 from Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, we rose to become the second fastest growing sector after water and sanitation. And we kept implementing that roadmap with their support. And Q4 2019, we became the fastest growing sector in the country today, civil aviation. Unfortunately, not due to anybody's fault, force majeure, COVID-19 has come to become what they have become, and you'll agree with me that civil aviation is the worst hit, including all of its value chain. And because the sector is so complex, the activity therein is equally very regimented and worldwide being regulated as one civil aviation. There is no aviation B. Everything that we will do will have to conform with the international norms and practice. And we are not alone in the sector. Example, we have port health within the system of civil aviation, which we have to look into their requirements. We also have to look into their own needs and their own activity to open the economy. Certainly, the answer is yes, we will open, and yes, it may be very soon, but we have to take into consideration the totality of the activity within the civil aviation before we are able to do so. I give just a very small example. You all know that we have cabin crew within airplanes, commercial airplanes, that tender for you to give you tea and coffee and so on and food. That is not the only function of a cabin crew. They are there to save your life. They are there in case of an emergency to be able to save your life. That's a primary function. That is exactly why in 1907, when they started to introduce nurses into airplanes to look after people, that's how we come to have a cabin crew. Those cabin crew are a certain number that they have to be within a particular kind of aircraft, depending on the contents of that aircraft. And those cabin crew will have to sit together, for example, and their numbers are determined. Because we have to create social distancing, we have to look at what can we do to get the cabin crew not to contaminate each other and contaminate the passengers. So I have just sent to Mr. Speaker, to the leader, and to the Chairman House Committee on Aviation, a 62-page document that we developed on how we think we can begin to open up the sector, which will be very soon. But this is being done in conjunction with all of the stakeholders in civil aviation. We've been working since the beginning of COVID-19 to see how, once we say start, we will come to start the sector. I want to assure the House not to take so much time, that we will be interfacing with the committee to be briefing them on a daily basis. We will also be using social media, especially Twitter and so on, handle, to explain to the public how we are going to start. What would happen when you go to an airport? Example, when you go to airport, you are required to go an hour before for local flight, 3 hours before for international flight. Now it will change, because we will need to take your temperature, check you up, and ensure that you are not showing any signs, and then we'll put you in a special place that you observe social distancing before you now board the flight, and you board in sequence, we create the gap, etc., etc. And once you show sign, if you show some sign, we have to take you somewhere to isolate you, to begin to give you further tests, and to take your sample, and there now the port health comes into play. etc., etc. There are also other workers like immigration, like customs, like police, like that they are working, cleaners of the airport, ticketing officials, and so on. So all of this will have to be looked into, and then we now say how that this is when we start. And finally, Mr. Speaker, for let me say personnel licensing. Whilst this COVID is going on, some people are out of medical, and they need to do their medical to ensure that they're fit enough to fly. Some people are out of currency of their licenses, which they need to go abroad to do. Well, luckily, Mr. Speaker, now we begin to do most of it in Nigeria. We have procured the simulators to do some of it in Nigeria, but they need to go and do that. But the world is shut down. So how do you do that? Are you going to get a pilot whose certificate has expired technically to come to begin to fly, or what are you going to do? What are the measures? So all of this is contained in this document, and we're brainstorming to see how best we can. But it will be very soon, I hope. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
And the entire leadership of this noble house, my dear colleagues, both my colleagues here in the House of Reps and my colleagues at the Council, thank you all, please. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure whether I can answer whether dead bodies contaminated. I'm sure the Minister of Health will say something about that. But let me just go straight to the issue of WAEC and NECO exams. You may have heard, studies are currently still out there whether children are as contagious as the rest of us. But I don't want to experiment with our children, and it was resolved by this noble house. Honorable members decided in January that we should shut down the schools. We asked that all schools vacate around the country, whether at, but you also appreciate that primary and secondary schools are on our concurrent legislative list. And therefore, ownership of the schools at the primary level is with the states. There are 68,181 primary schools around the country, and we only regulate them from NERDC, where is the curriculum content. We share a couple of other materials, but we do not control the premises or how children interact. That also applies at the secondary school level. We own a couple of schools, 104 unity schools around the country. The rest of the schools are owned by private and state governments. We do not want the children to return to school immediately because we are not sure how far this transmission can go with them. They also cannot operate in a vacuum. The country runs on a superstructure. So when the transportation system is limited, you can't transport children either. Teachers can't come to school. Feeding will be impaired. Our health challenges cannot confront at the same time. So we are running this within a larger, in fact, every day when we meet, we assess all the risks and the factors around each of the different departments and different organizations of government. All of that goes on. But we have a challenge. WAEC and NECO are things that cannot wait. The problem with having children is that they grow. This year, for children to be able to come into class 1 next year, that means somebody must leave class 6 this year, so that exit will permit an entry. And in order to be able to do that, they must have the certification to move on. This is where NECO, WAEC, NABTEB, and all our examining bodies come to play. Right now, we just finished a meeting of AU ministers, and we are looking at other options. How can we examine the children? If I examine you in physics and I want to know what is the position of prisms, I would like to extract that knowledge from you using different mediums. So, right now, our challenge is how do we get that knowledge and be able to certify the child In West Africa, which governs West African examination bodies, we have agreed to postpone exams indefinitely. We've also agreed to postpone NAPTEB exams indefinitely. So also for NECO. But NECO we control, and that is national, is within Nigeria. We are entering a rainy season period when we cannot say, for instance, we want to do, social distancing in the fields, or bring out to your table, or let us take in only exit level children. That's class 6 and class 3. Those are options before us, and we're exploring them. We are also liaising with every one of the stakeholders and the people who mark, those who produce the results. Because we've experimented with online learning for the past 1 month. As soon as this broke, as part of an in furtherance of what the Ministry of Education was already planning, we started deploying a set of skill-based network, such that you could actually access our online learning materials, because we dematerialize all of them into a content space. Now, states were encouraged, using their SUBEB platform, to access them. Many states are doing that. But you know, and part of the second question would be, how do children of the poor get it? Less than 20% of our children are children of the elite. The real problem of developing manpower for Nigeria lies at the fringes of society. And around the country, we are trying to get people to even sign on. Even when MTN, Glo, Airtel, and all the service providers have given us free online to all our applications, there are not many people who can access them, because networks are weak, or because they do not even have the devices. Because for you to have, we have nearly 20 million children in the country, and the total number of devices available in the country are still below 500,000. So that is not even possible. We then asked SUBEBs to translate this into state programs. 31 states have already gotten on it. So that if, for instance, you're from Anambra State, you will see ABS running their program, how they want to run history, economics, biology. You go to Delta State, you see the same thing. In Lagos State, Lagos has done very, very well. So all our programs are running. However, for those who are running it on radio, as way into the hinterlands as possible, even that one radio is shared by a family. How do you then educate 3 children? Radio. Now, for places where there is no power, there is no light, to sell Tiger battery, which is the biggest, in fact, it's the palliative now. If you can afford Tiger battery now, it's a big problem. So really, we will have to figure out how we can isolate the number that we want to immediately deal with, and have the national NCDC and the Ministry of Health, because every day when we go to these meetings, I ask for the updates as to when do we think it will be safe enough to return the children to schools, because that will determine when we can be ready to examine them one way or the other. If not, we might have to make contingent plans to just examine them based on a certain different set of parameters, so that we don't create a vacuum. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, thank you.
Hold on, Honorable Minister, sorry. I'm sure many members want to know. I just want clarification. Is your online teaching still going on?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, it's still running.
Okay, so for all intents and purposes, many of the kids out there, and you said yourself that they're only 20% elite, 80% of the kids out there may not be enjoying this online alternative. Is that correct?
Exactly, that's my point, Mr. Speaker. I'm saying that
when you, I believe we all know the importance of education. It's a fundamental here. So there is an intervention, possible intervention coming in from your end, from the executive. There's a 500 billion stimulus and a couple of other things. Is there any provision, or did you make any attempt to make provisions that, because you just said here that many of these students don't even have the devices. And the reason why they don't have the devices is because they cannot afford the devices. So is there any input or provision for the acquisition of devices for those students? I'm mindful of the fact that your constitution says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of your station of birth. I'm aware that Ogbeni Raufa is here. I'm aware that Ogbeni Raufa is here, who as governor was able to provide a lot of these things for the indigent students. Is there any attempt by the federal government, when you bring your intervention, is that included?
Mr. Speaker, we have only just made some requests. However, the work we are doing, or the work we've done so far, we've looked at how much it will cost to provide each child with a tablet in Nigeria. And like you pointed out, we cannot discriminate against some parts and another parts. There are nearly, like I said, 20 million children in all strata of schools in Nigeria. In the university system, we have 2.2 million. Now, we only own 43 universities. And these 43 universities have an intake of nearly 1.6 million. The remaining 90-something institutions that belong to private people only it's taking about 400, all of them put together. So really, if you're going to give laptops or tablets as a device at the cost of, say, $200 per unit, you're looking at a national budget that will exceed maybe 400 billion. Now, that does not begin to, even fit into what the national problems are at the moment. Many people around the country, even when you are going to share these devices, you need to bring them into the system first. Our biggest problem as Minister of Education was primarily out-of-school children. Nigeria has like 10.2 million out-of-school children recorded. And we had been working on a system to get them in. First of all, formalizing the Amajiri school system, which accommodates about 30% to 60% of that. Then finding a way to reach all the markets where all the children become helpers and trade persons and help them formalize themselves. We were still working on this program before we were met with this one. It was riding on the back of that we had developed some of these online services as a way of bringing content to those children ahead of time. When COVID met us, it met us with a situation where we can't procure laptops and start distributing. So it would not be proper at this point to say that this is the time to go and get devices and start going into the villages to give it to them, because nobody has been prepared for it. Two, as you may be aware, the key problem is with people having any sort of device, because we're broadcasting. We're broadcasting on TV, we're broadcasting on radio, and we're broadcasting online. So that there must be multiple channels for access. So that each one that you can get onto, then you can use it. But I agree with you, as a country, first things first, since we know that this is the number of children we're going to have almost continuously in the 12th strata of, actually from class 1 to 6 and from class secondary 1 to 6 again, that's 12, plus another 4 years in university. So we know polytechnics, colleges of education, all of these, since we know this, we can begin today on a plan that says we will produce our own laptops. First of all, we don't have the kind of money you're talking about. Nobody has that. The country does not even have it in reserves. But if the country begins today, like all the questions have been directed here, local content, we begin today to say, minimum, we will begin to roll out. The plan we have in Imo State, or which the governor of Imo State, for instance, show, is that as soon as you enroll in Imo State University, in your first year. They probably give you a laptop that then they charge you 20,000 every year until you go out. You don't have to collect it from the child today, so that you prepare that child to own it and use that as an exit strategy. We can begin that now. That will then dovetail into a Ministry of Trade and Investment agreeing that they will have licensed people from Ministry of Communication who will be producing it in Nigeria. It's not another avenue to move money abroad, since we know that this is what our country is planning to do. So I agree with you. That plan should be available, but it is not an emergency now. Our emergency response is to first of all get as many people to learn, using whatever means we are. Community centers, wherever we can find 4 or 5 children, space them, teach. If we can now, we have developed what we call master teachers. Master teachers are now looking at how to look at the revision exercise that we ought to do for those going for their BCE and their WAEC, so that there will be uniform revision to bring everybody up to speed. This idea that only Anambra State and Delta and Imo will pass WAEC more than other people, we can't keep encouraging it. My idea is that at the level of revision, let everybody who is available for that exam be taught by single master teachers in each field. I bring you a mathematics teacher who understands geometry. He takes it on very well and make sure that everybody is at the same standard. Not that because you are in Sokoto, you don't have a good geometry teacher. Nobody ever even explained to you, and you walk into WAEC and you see the thing. You will be confused. So if we have a uniform revision, at least for the first level, and those who are coming to take exam at those 2 levels, we are working on that. That's already been done. We want to continue. Education is a continuous exercise, even as you are, and your good self, I am also a student. We are learning as we go on. We believe that it is important to continue this engagement so that the country will be better for it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. It wasn't an indictment. In fact, we commend you for your efforts and for thinking outside the box. But we just feel, where 80% is a large number. And I believe that where there's a political will, there's a way. And we can't ignore these children, because it will turn around to bite us in the back. I believe Osun State was one of the, supposedly they had very little income. So maybe we should knock heads with the former governor, how he was able to do it in spite of no money at all in the state. So I want to thank you again and commend you again for your efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Philo. Thank you, Honorable.
I think there was a question for the minister. I can't remember, was there something for the Minister of Information? If there wasn't any question for the Minister of Information, I would want somebody to force a question out for him. The Minister of Information, Alhaji Lai Mohammed. Oh, please, before we forget, I just remember there was a very important question, I can't remember who it was, about the police and kitting of the police, because they're frontline too. So, if anyone can take that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Right Honorable Speaker of the House, the Deputy Speaker, the House Leader, all the principal members of the House, and honorable members, and members of the press. I will start off by saying there are actually 2 global pandemics. The first is coronavirus. The second is fake news and misinformation. As a matter of fact, fake news is making the fight against coronavirus much more difficult. And that is why I appreciate the observations of the honorable members who spoke first about fake news and what the PTF and the Ministry of Information, what we are doing about this second wave of pandemic. Let me start by saying there's actually no lack of awareness on the part of Nigerians about COVID-19. This has been attested to by the NOI poll, which showed that 99% of Nigerians are aware of the pandemic. Also realize that awareness must be translated to action. Hence, we are launching a series of radio jingles and TVCs in this regard. This in addition to those TVCs and jingles that are currently playing on our televisions and radio stations. The jingles and TVCs dwell on general information on the disease, like social distancing, personal hygiene, avoiding mass gatherings, wearing of face masks, avoiding stigmatization, and guidelines on the burial of those who have died from the disease or other diseases. Some of these jingles and TVCs are already running, while more will come on stream in the days ahead. We are doing this because we believe that in the absence of any vaccine or drugs for the treatment of COVID-19, the only option right now is what we call the non-pharmaceutical intervention, NPI, which is anchored on the use of advocacy and public enlightenment to empower the citizens to protect themselves. The various agencies under the Ministry of Information and Culture have also told the same path. The National Orientation Agency, for instance, has engaged in social mobilization, advocacy, and public enlightenment. They have also leveraged on Radio Nigeria and the NTA for their campaign because of the lack of the most needed resources. So they have also partnered with a lot of NGOs to run their campaigns. The NTA and the FRCN have also used their resources to push the advocacy and sensitization campaign, making many jingles and TVCs to educate and enlighten Nigerians on the disease. In addition, they have devoted a long bout to COVID-19 news, leaving them with little or no time for any advertisement. As a matter of fact, the NTA has had to rejig its daily schedule to be able to accommodate a huge segment to deal with the COVID-19. The News Agency of Nigeria has also done same using its SMS platforms to disseminate COVID-19 advocacy and enlightenment campaign. The agency has also made enlightenment videos which have been widely circulated on social media and WhatsApp. It is important to know that the ministers and the agencies are daily changing changing their TVs and jingles because the COVID-19 is, as it's unfolding, the ministries and agencies also have to change their campaigns. I personally have also, undertaking media rounds to further enlighten Nigerians on the pandemic. We've also asked the regulatory agency, National Broadcasting Commission, to encourage other stations to partner with the PTF in ensuring that our enlightenment and advocacy campaigns are carried on other stations which are not just government-owned. And I want to take the opportunity also to thank the Broadcast Organization of Nigeria, who have all devoted a lot of their time to our daily briefing, and many of whom actually carry our jingles, free of charge. Though an external broadcasting station, the Voice of Nigeria is also leveraging heavily on the social media to support the advocacy and sanitation campaign. Of course, because we noticed that some of the stations also have engaged in fake news and misinformation, the NBC, which is the government agency, has sent out strong warnings to these agencies. I must say that this campaign is not just about, jingles, advocacies, or TVC campaign. It's also about heavy social mobilization. And this is where the NOA has been working in conjunction with the traditional rulers, with the faith organizations, and with the major stakeholders along the line up to the local government level to ensure that the COVID-19 campaign are understood by the major stakeholders. The truth of the matter is that in certain areas, you need the buy-in of the faith leaders, you need the buy-in of the traditional leaders. Otherwise, your campaign will not be successful. We continue in this line to ensure that the campaign against COVID-19 succeeds. Yes, an issue was raised about barrier. We've noticed that in certain areas, the barrier guidelines, especially as it affects social distancing, is not being obeyed. And that is why our new TVCs and jingles actually is along the area of social gathering, funerals, burials, and stigmatization. We will continue for as long as there's no vaccine and there's no medicine for COVID-19. We will continue to ramp up our campaign in the area of total enlightenment to ensure that the country is safe and we're able to contain COVID-19. Thank you very much.
There were a series of questions around testing, and I'll just try and answer them together. We have 3 goals in testing that we're trying to solve. We're trying to solve for proximity, to bring the test closer to people. We're trying to solve for scale, to scale up the number of tests we're doing. And we're trying to solve for the future, so that whatever we build will be here to last. Sometimes the solutions are not the same, because there might be just 1 case or 2 cases in Imo State, but they need a testing center in the state. While in Lagos, we have half of all the cases, and we need to solve for numbers. So we're working on all those together. Right now, as we speak, I have 2 teams. Innocent and Emeka Ndodo are in Port Harcourt. From Port Harcourt, they'll go to Owerri and then Oka to set up these 3 centers. Abdul Majid and Sarah are on their way to Gombe, and from there they'll go to Yola. So far, since I met you the last time, we've moved our testing centers from 5 to 21. And we're pushing every single day to bring a test center to every state in Nigeria. That is solving for proximity. For scale, we have set ourselves a target to test 2 million Nigerians in the next 3 months. And we have developed a specific strategy around this with a procurement plan with our UN family brothers, partners, working with us together to achieve these targets. These are the targets that we have set for ourselves. Today, we have tested just 20,000, but even at that 20,000, we are not fulfilling the capacity that we have at the moment, because testing doesn't only depend on the lab. It depends on the logistics of collecting the sample and transporting it safely and everything around that. So we'll continue working hard to make this better. We have a challenge in a few states that we are simply not collecting enough samples from. We haven't had a confirmed case in Kogi State. We haven't had a confirmed case in Cross River State. There are other states with very low numbers of cases. We have been encouraging all the states in Nigeria to continue trying to collect samples. The only way we can know whether we have this disease or not is if we test for it. If we don't test, we will not know. So we continue to work collaboratively, supporting states with the infrastructure, with the human resources, with the virus transport media, with the nasopharyngeal swabs, everything they need to collect samples so that we can test. Our role at NCDC is to support the states. The states are our primary clients in all the work that we do. Then I move on to Honorable Wauba's question, and I think he asked if NCDC was sleeping. Honorable brother, to be honest, we haven't slept in 3 months. So the answer is actually to the contrary. We have a small team, when we started off, just 200 technical staff in NCDC that have been asked to carry on this challenge for the country. We do it in collaboration with many other public health workers across the country, trying to work very hard to support the states, our tertiary hospitals, and everyone involved in this response. We have only been able to do it because of the collaboration of many other parastatals in the health sector, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, National Agency for the Control of AIDS, and really all the other parastatals that have supported us with human resources, logistics, and infrastructure just to manage this outbreak. Around the treatment centers, there have been a lot of complaints about why NCDC is not picking up people to come into treatment centers. The responsibility for treatment centers is actually one of the states. Our role is to support them with guidelines, with knowledge, with infrastructure, sometimes with support in order to do this. And I can tell you for sure that every state has been working very hard to increase the treatment capacity they have. No country can increase the number of bed spaces available by 300–400% in 2 weeks. But this is the challenge that we are faced. And you would have seen that the state governments have been proactive on this. Lagos just opened the 5th large treatment center in Bagada. In Abuja, the Federal Ministry of the Federal Capital Territory is working very hard with a lot of partners to open the dome up, to take in more patients. As I traveled around the country last week, every single state is working hard to increase the treatment capacity in their state. So we have to support them in this regard, and that's exactly what we're doing. In terms of our burial guidelines, we have burial guidelines. We call it actually the guidelines for safe and dignified burial. Safe is important, but dignified is also important. We try to ensure that when the burial happens, it happens safely, but we also respect the norms, tradition, and religion of whatever group is burying their dead. We never take the corpses away. It is the state government that works with the families to find a way of organizing the funeral, but never is any corpse taken away from the family. So those guidelines are available on our website, and are very easy to read and to understand and to use. There was a question on how prepared we are for the second wave. We are working very hard. No time have I worked with a set of leaders in the Presidential Task Force that are so committed to improving our level of preparedness over the past few weeks. And we know that this is a marathon, that our work is cut out for us, and we'll have to continue doing this for the months ahead. So every day we meet for a number of hours to re-strategize, to find new approaches, to bring in the private sector, work with the states, and really leverage on all the resources available to our country to make sure that we improve on our response. There was a question about the difference in the epidemic in the UK and Nigeria. The challenge is every country's epidemic is different. We have this virus now in close to 200 countries around the world. Some have experienced an explosion, others have not. And so why an outbreak happens in any country depends on an interface between humans, the virus, and the environment. And the circumstances are different in every context. Our role is to make sure Nigeria tries and uses all the resources available at our disposal to make sure that we're better prepared to respond. There was a question that said NCDC has failed Nigeria. I think history will judge us. And let's work together in the short term to get to the end of this. Now is not really the time to decide on whether one group has failed or not. Now is the time to come together as a country, executive, legislators, state, local, federal, everybody. We need the support of everyone. This outbreak is not going to end next week. I will be criticized for saying this again, but that is the honest truth. We will not get to the end of this next week or the week after. It's a marathon. We need everyone playing along as we move forward. Finally, Right Honorable Speaker, I want to end with an appeal. Appeal to all the honorable members in this House to please use your voices. We need your voices as part of this response. Neither testing nor treatment is going to get us out of this situation. We can only get out of this if Nigerians come along with us. We need to adopt a new way of life, a way of life that is alien to us. And it is very difficult. So we need your voices to help Nigerians come to terms with physical distancing, come to terms with what we are doing in this room at the moment. All of us sitting more than 2 meters apart, wearing masks. It is very difficult for a majority of Nigerians to do. So we need your voices. We need it desperately. We need Nigerians to come to terms with washing their hands and using sanitizers all the time. And not just Nigerians that can afford it, but all Nigerians. This is a Herculean task, but this is the task that history has given you and given us. Let us work together as we drive all our energies together into the future that we'll now seek. And on my part, I'll end by saying I look forward to working very closely with you, Right Honorable Speaker, to craft a new set of laws to define the work that we do on infectious diseases so that we're never in this type of situation again. Thank you.
Thank you, DG. There's one question that the minority leader just reminded me. He wants to know the relationship between 5G and COVID.
So my expertise is limited to COVID-19. I really don't have the expertise on 5G to answer that question. As far as I know, there's no relationship between the two.
He has answered you. He said as far as he knows, there's no relationship. All right. There's a question here. I'm sorry for. Thank you, DG. There's a question here from Honorable Nasir Ali Ahmed from Kano. He wants to know from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He wants to know what arrangements have been put in place. We have about 600 people coming in, students, about 200 or 400 students. And on Friday, I think another 400 on Friday from Dubai. So total of about 600 students, thereabouts. So he wants to know what arrangements have been put in place to receive and quarantine these students, possibly to test them, or if they've been tested already.
Honorable Speaker, honorable members, it's an honor to appear before you here today. In respect of the question that has just been asked regarding the evacuation of Nigerians from overseas, the first batch, by God's grace, will come in tomorrow, actually, from the UAE. The challenge has been enormous in trying to arrange for these evacuees to come into the country. The first challenge was the question of accommodating them somewhere for the 14 days of quarantine. We've had problems with accommodation here in Abuja, hotels. Initially, hotels were not very keen to receive these evacuees, in fact, to have anything to do with this COVID-19. But with time and with greater sensitization, they are much more willing to do so now. But of course, our plan all along was to take some to Lagos and to take some to Abuja. Now, but we've had more difficulties getting accommodation in Lagos. But the governor of Lagos, as I've said in many fora, has been absolutely fantastic in the assistance he's been giving us to try and get more rooms in Lagos. So where we are today, Honorable Speaker, is that tomorrow we hope to have about 265 Nigerians coming in, and they will be at the Orchid Hotel in Lekki, and also the Swiss International in Ikeja. One of the big challenges we've also been facing is that a lot of these compatriots have stayed much longer than they had planned and envisaged in these countries overseas, unfortunately, and of course they've had to, pay for hotels and things that they never planned to or budgeted for, and we've struggled and are still struggling to get funding for this whole exercise. Ordinarily, it's an emergency, and the government would be able to fund this emergency. But in this case, in this situation, we've had to ask them to fund their own tickets, those who want to come back. And but what we're now doing is together with NEMA, whose constitutional duty it is to assist Nigerians in emergency situations, and they have funding for that. We're now working out modalities to at least try to subsidize the returns, at least, or the accommodation, because again they are expected to pay for 14 days in hotels. We've tried to negotiate as best we can with these hotels, and have arrived at a figure of 20,000 naira for the Lagos ones and 15,000 naira for the Abuja hotels. But as I said, we're truly trying to see how we can support them in paying for that. Then on Friday, the British have an agreement with British Airways to come and evacuate British nationals here in Nigeria. We're coming with an empty plane, and we have asked them to help us for our Nigerian empty plane and come here. So we've done a deal with them. Of course, we're going to pay half the cost of the plane coming in. So the most important aspect is really the accommodation, and we're going to be accommodating them in premises already for those 14 days. On Friday, the British Airways flight, they will be accommodated, although it's going to Lagos, but we're looking at transferring them from Lagos to Abuja, because there are not enough rooms in Lagos. So those that are coming on the British Airways flight will be coming to Abuja, and will be staying at the Barcelona, a large 300-room hotel here. We've made arrangements for, when they arrive, transportation to the various places of accommodation, and the accommodation, the hotels, have been looked at by the Center for Disease Control and approved, and they will be monitored for that period of 2 weeks with the NCDC, and Foreign Affairs will be working very closely with them. We're making arrangements also for security to be stationed at those hotels. Now we have about 4,000 Nigerians wanting to come back, and we cannot conceivably bring all of them back. In fact, we have a number small numbers in different countries all over the world. So we're trying to focus on those countries that have almost like a critical mass, the largest number of Nigerians. So that's the United States of America, where we're looking at we're looking at 2 points, Atlanta and New York, and hopefully we'll be able to start with the United States around next Monday with Ethiopian Airlines, Monday the 11th of May, with Ethiopian Airlines from JFK. And, those ones will also be coming to Abuja. And we're trying to put on a flight, to try and get a flight for China, because our nationals in China are facing all kinds of challenges, as you're all aware. And so we're doing everything possible to get them back. But the challenge we also have is the resources. The NCDC has to manage all these people coming in addition to all the other very challenging work that they're having to do. And so there's only a limit to how many we can bring back. And that's the message we're trying to get out to them. We know how desperate a lot of them are to come back, but just to know that there's an absolute limit. In fact, the original limit we have, and we might have to exceed that slightly, is that we can only take 200 in Lagos and 200 in Abuja at any one time, and that will be for 2 weeks. So really 400 people for 2 weeks, and the others will just have to wait until it's their turn. So it's a very, very difficult situation, but we're really trying to manage it as best we can. And we're just very keen to get that first flight coming in to raise the morale. And we know that there are some students in the flights coming in with UAE one, and also the British Airways at the end of the week. But we have in place all the arrangements for their accommodation for this first week. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. I think we'll close for now, but I think we might need either the DGN's, NCDC, the Honourable Minister of Health, or perhaps the Secretary of the Government. I have about 3 issues here. Actually, Honourable Minister, there's one question for you from members. Minister of Foreign Affairs. Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Members want to know, because you made a statement here that the Nigerians coming in will be responsible for their own upkeep for 14 days. I think there are concerns from members that if they come in for 14 days and you're asking them to take care of themselves, there will be people there who are indigent. And even those who are not indigent, like you rightly said, they've been away for a long time, beyond their expectation. They may not have the wherewithal, and if they do, perhaps in foreign exchange, to take care of their upkeep for 14 days. 14 days is a long time. So the question arises, and if they have to, and they have to change money or get their family to bring them to there, the purpose of the quarantine is defeated. So members believe that there should be a way to find some form of palliatives for 14 days for a limited number of people. There are 600 in all, even if we put them all together, so that we sever their linkage with the public, with anybody in public. That came to me. Do you have any response, please?
Absolutely right. So we are working out with with NEMA a mechanism to try and pay for that, and hopefully this will go through. So that's one of the things. It's just we didn't want to announce that will be what we will actually do until we have it signed, sealed, and delivered. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you. So I guess anybody can take a stab at this. The Honourable Jaha's questions, he says, have not been answered. Honourable Jaha, is he here? Yes, he wants to know what is the rationale of allowing markets and businesses, or business centers rather, to be open whilst we're stopping people from going to worship centers. What is the rationale of allowing markets to be open and business centers, but we're shutting worship centers. That is from Honorable Jaha. He also wants to know, what measures are you taking in Borno State to prevent a repeat of what happened in Kano State? And I think somebody else also had even mentioned that on this side. Yes, yes, Honorable Toby also mentioned that. What proactive steps, so that we don't move after the horses bolted the stable, what proactive steps are being taken to prevent a repeat of Kano in other states, so to speak, Borno, for example? And I think Honorable, they addressed the issue of local content, they did. Honorable Coco says his question hasn't been answered, which is that the administering of vitamin C and carrots to patients in isolation centers. He wants to know your reaction. The reports are that patients are being given vitamin C and carrots in the isolation centers, and whether that is working or not. I believe the Chinese doctor question was answered by the Minister of Health. He said the question about where the Chinese doctors are now, I believe you answered it, the Minister of Health. He has left? Okay, but maybe the NCDC DG may answer that as well. So those are the three questions. NCDC?
I think there were three questions I was asked to address. One is the one on the challenge between markets and prayer centers. The decision to open markets is not because we think, or the assessment was that markets are safe. It was really because markets for foodstuff especially are existential for our survival. So a very hard compromise was made to allow people to go to markets within a restricted number of hours and within a restricted number of days, so that they can at least get food to eat. So I don't think it's a question of whether markets are riskier or less risky than churches or mosques. It's just a decision of what do we need to exist every day versus where can we make a little bit more sacrifice for a few more weeks as we consider the options for other sectors. So this was a very difficult decision, but I think I'll ask for some patience to bear with us as we look at the restrictions over the next few weeks, see how they work. But the challenge is that the markets are still not as safe as we would have liked them to be. And so we really need everybody's collaboration to still ensure that we can achieve a little bit more distancing in our markets, as hard as that is. There was the question of what proactive steps we are taking in other states. We are working very closely with most states, but sometimes it's a challenge. The states also have to come to the party. So many states are calling us to ask for more testing centers, more kits, more people, more support. But that question is not coming from all states. So we really need the honorable members in the House to also, as you are asking us what we are doing, to please also ask your state governments, your colleagues at the state level. Because for us to win this fight, we all have to come together. We will provide the training, provide the logistics, provide the swab sticks to take the samples, but the actual work at the state level still has to be carried out by people employed by each state government across the country. The final question for me was on vitamin C and carrots. Vitamin C is always a good thing. So as long as you don't take too much of it, carrots too are always a good thing. So I think there's no harm in taking vitamin C as long as you don't take it in excessive doses, and there's no harm in eating carrots. But there's no evidence yet that any of these has a specific impact on this specific virus. But it's generally a good thing to do. And so once you're sick, it's good to increase your consumption of vegetables and whatever else healthy food that you can, so that you remain well-fed, nutritious, and exercise, and just able to enable your body then respond to the virus. Because ultimately, for most viruses, not just for COVID-19, for most viruses there's no cure. It's the same for yellow fever, it's the same for monkeypox, and even for Lassa. So what we depend on is for the body's immune system to fight off this virus, and for sometimes it does it more successfully than others. In COVID-19, in 95 to 98% of the time, the body is successful in fighting off the virus. You would have seen the case fatality ratio at the moment. We've had close to 3,000 cases and about 70 deaths. I think we're just up to 80. Yes, every death is a tragedy, but it is by no means a death sentence, and we will keep working to enable us continue learning very quickly in order to recover. Most people have recovered, and we hope that we can keep a good recovery rate in Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you. I think your answer to Honorable Jaha. Honorable, there's still a couple of more questions. Didi. A couple more questions. Members are bringing here. We'll round up in a minute. It's pretty late. Sorry about that. So your answer to Honorable Jaha's question is that whilst the federal government is doing its bit, we should talk to the state governors to do their own. It's a joint
effort.
You saw this, right? Joint task. Right. The other question is, does the disease affect animals? Honorable Doze's question, he said it wasn't answered. Can it be transmitted to animals?
On the question on if the disease affects animals, the honest question, which is often very difficult for us to give, is one saying that we don't know. We haven't tested it in enough. We haven't collected in enough samples in animals to know whether it affects animals or not. We have had a scarcity of testing materials, so we are focused on testing people. I think there will be research done by the relevant research bodies over the next few months on whether it affects any other animals, but for the meantime, we will save all our reagents and all our testing infrastructure to focus on humans.
The Chinese doctors, where are they at this point?
So my responsibility is managing the public health response. They are providing support for the clinical response, but I believe they're fine. They're contributing to the response already. They were isolated for a number of days to make sure that they are safe, but I think they are now contributing to the response, supporting in the installation of the equipment that they brought, and making sure that we are better prepared to manage the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Digi. Well, honorable colleagues, I think we have come to the close of this. I think we have come to the close of this segment of our sitting. I want to thank our guests from PTF for taking time out in their busy schedule. It's been about almost 4 hours now. I want to thank you very much for your dedication once more and your commitment. I think it's been very rewarding, and most of the answers and questions we will use here for our own information, and from time to time, we will, if there are other questions, we will invite you back to the House. I want to particularly also thank the National Coordinator, Dr. Sani Aliu, who we understand in the House here that you lost your octogenarian father last week. We pray that Almighty God will grant him eternal rest, and that you have found time, even in these difficult times and the time of mourning, to attend to national duties speaks volumes. Thank you very much, and may his soul rest in peace. Leader Whip, can you escort our guests? Dr. Mamora, you may want to join them in the entourage. Okay, you want to go? I guess you are used to the chambers. You know your way around.
so that